What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Hawks Hoops podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Hawk. We got a lot to talk about in the docket today. We're going to talk about the Rookie of the Year race, Chet, Wemby. Let's catch up on how they've been playing their first about 14-ish games of their careers. Talking about why I am falling in love, and I truly mean falling in love with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Some trade ideas for a couple of contending teams of whether or not I think they should make a trade. Shout out to Bleacher Report for some of these trades. Unfortunately, we're talking about Chicago Bulls again. It's not for good things, unfortunately. And then last but not least, there's a couple of players and teams I want to show some love to. I didn't get a chance to do as deep as a dive on them, but I've been seeing some good things and I like what I've seen from a couple of guys, a couple of teams. So I just want to show some love to them. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into this and talk about this Rookie of the Year. Chet Holmgren, Victor Wembanyama. On paper, they actually look very, very similar. I mean, one looks a little bit better than the other, but we'll talk about why in a second. Chet so far this season, 18 points, 8 rebounds, 56% from the field, 43% from three, on 4 attempts a game, mind you, 2.5 blocks. Wemby this season, 19 points a game, 7 rebounds, 43% from the field, 26% from three, 5 attempts. I didn't write down Wemby's blocks. I want to say it was also about little over 2 a game, which Wemby's numbers, if you don't know, for the defensive side of the ball are crazy because people aren't attempting as many shots at the rim when he's on the court. If you go to NBA.com, look at the tracking numbers, he's up there in at least over 2 blocks a game with some of the elite defenders like Chet, Wemby. Rudy is over 2 a game as well, I want to say again this year. But the crazy thing about Wemby is, in terms of field goals defended, or the amount, or in terms of the amount of times that offensive players have tried to shoot the ball at the rim, whether it be a layup, whatever, at the rim, and he's on the floor, is like the least amount in terms of guys who's defended X amount of shots. Like, my point is, offensive players don't go to the basket when Wemby's on the floor, and he's still getting 2 blocks a game, which is absolutely insane. Chet Holmgren right now, though, I want to focus more so on Chet. The big conversation about Wemby is right now, and is that you look at his percentages, they don't look good. You can check on a night-to-night basis. He might have a night where he's 2 for 12, 1 for 5 from three. His shooting splits aren't great. I think part of that is a major part of that is Devin Vassell's been in and out of the lineup for the Spurs. Unfortunately, I have Devin Vassell on fantasy, so I know that pain firsthand. When Vassell is in, the Spurs just simply look better. His playmaking is good. The offense that Vassell also brings in terms of scoring alleviates some of the pressure from Wemby. But the biggest difference to me in the numbers that you're seeing between Chet Holmgren and Victor Wembanyama is Chet Holmgren was not asked to be the number 1 option on his team. Victor Wembanyama is immediately being asked to be the number 1 option, and you're seeing a lot of growing pains with that. When Chet's on the floor for the Oklahoma City Thunder, it's you got 1 or 2 dribbles to make your move, get to your spot, or we're deliberately running this play for you in your spot. Victor Wembanyama is getting a lot more freedom on the San Antonio Spurs, which, to be honest, surprises me a little bit. I'm not seeing, at least not initially, and like I get it, the team is young, they're dealing with injuries, but at least initially, I'm not seeing at all times the Greg Popovich offense that I thought I was going to see. Wemby has a lot of freedom for at good or bad. There are times when Wemby has the ability to he's just dribbling 5-6 dribbles to trying to create his own shot. Sometimes a bad shot goes up and doesn't go in. Sometimes an interesting looking shot goes up and it does go in. It's been hit or miss, I think, for Victor Wembanyama. I'm not jumping off the bandwagon or anything like that. I'm not calling him a bust or anything like that. I think at the very least, and I want to make this very clear, while yes, I think offensively he is struggling, Victor Wembanyama on the defensive side of the ball has been elite so far this season. Both Victor and Chet have been elite so far this season on the defensive side of the ball. Chet, on the other hand, his numbers look great offensively, and he looks great offensively because, like I said, he's not asked to be the number 1 option on this team. He's not being asked to carry the offensive load for this team. He is playing with an all-NBA caliber guard, an all-star guard. Sorry if you see me look up. I'm watching my Eagles game as I do this with y'all, and the Bills just scored. But Chet and the Oklahoma City Thunder, it's just all around a better team. And also shout out to the Oklahoma City Thunder just as a unit because they look really, really good right now. And Chet's a big part of that. His defense is a really, 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 really big part of what they got going on. They're second in the West. They're 11-5 right now. They're top 5 in offense, top 10 in defense. And like I said, Chet's playing and has the luxury of playing with an all NBA caliber guard and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, who at the time of recording, believe it or not, is leading the league in the steals per game to a game. He's number one in the NBA in contested threes a game. He's top 10 in deflections. I've been very surprised and very pleased with the level of defense that SGA is bringing to the court. I'm not saying that SGA has been a bad defender in years past. I just don't feel like he brought this level of intensity that we're seeing this year on the defensive end of the ball. I don't feel like I saw that in years past from him. So shout out to him for playing better defense. And just all around, the Thunder are, to me, a better team. Hopefully J-Dub, Jalen Williams gets better soon. He's out with a left hip strain right now. But before that, it was 17 a game from him. This team has been looking great. They were winning 6 straight before they lost to my Sixers just the other night. The Thunder look great. In terms of the rookie of the year race, in terms of if I have someone who I would pick for rookie of the year right now, I think I'm leaning a little bit more Chet. I don't remember what my pick was at the beginning of the season. I did that with my man Dan on the Dodcast a couple weeks ago in the beginning of the season. I want to say I picked Wemby because of the freedom that he was going to have and the defensive impact that he was going to have. But Chet is looking like the nod right now to me because he's contributing to winning. And I think that goes a long way, or will go a long way in voters' minds, because his numbers are going to look better. His percentages are going to look better. He's leading to winning. The Oklahoma City Thunder are likely going to be a playoff team. I think the Spurs have a longer way to go in their rebuild because in OKC's place, in the Thunder's case, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander was their first building block piece. And then you added onto it with guys like Giddey, J-Dub, now Chet. In the Spurs case, while yes, I do like Devin Vassell, I like Jeremy Shohan, I like the pieces that they have there. But to me, their first real building block piece that could be, okay, this guy is our future, is Victor Wembanyama. So both of these teams, while I don't even want to call OKC a rebuilding team anymore, to be completely honest with you, while both of these teams are, I'll say it in quotes, rebuilding, the Thunder are towards the tail end of their rebuild phase and are now entering into the, okay, we need to make moves to continue to be good and potentially a couple years down the road try to win a championship, realizing we have a really talented young team. The Spurs are still very, very, very much in the beginning of the rebuilding process. And I think it's just going to take a little longer for them and Victor to at least look as good as what we expect them to look. Oof. Eagles down 10. I want to address the elephant in the room when it comes to the Thunder. Josh Giddey, some very crazy and I'll get crazy is the only word I can think of. Josh Giddey was recently, some allegations are put up against him. He allegedly had an inappropriate relationship with a underage girl. It's pretty much is all I'm going to say about the situation right now until we have some more information. I'm going to trust that the NBA and the authorities at B, whether that be the police, the court systems, whatever, come to the bottom of this, and that the proper punishment, if necessary, is given out, and that the truth just come out of whatever this craziness is. Josh Giddey did play, I want to say this past Friday for the Thunder. It was kind of weird because he got this crazy big standing ovation from the crowd when he was introduced during starting lineups. Some people are making a conversation about the crowd's reaction to him being introduced to starting lineups, but he also is one of their starting guards, and he always gets a big reaction during their starting lineups. So I'm just waiting for more information on that, but that is definitely the elephant in the room when it comes to Oklahoma City Thunder. But outside of that, the Thunder look really, really good, and I'm enjoying watching Thunder basketball. On a little less exciting note, the Bulls continue to struggle, and it's now getting comical for me personally. They're 5-12 right now. They're 3-7 in their last 10. They recently lost their in-season tournament game against the Toronto Raptors, and the game was pretty much out of hand the whole entire game. The largest lead the Raptors had was 20. They had around a 15 to 13 point lead for pretty much the entire game. The biggest lead the Bulls had was 3, and that was in like the first 5 minutes of the game. And then after that, the Raptors dominated the game for basically end-to-end win for the Raptors. The game comes down to the end of the game. It's like 4 or 5 seconds left. The shot clock's turned off, and the Raptors put up a 3. And as we talked about this last week about the in-season tournament and how I was curious to see who was going to be the first player, or the first team to be mad that the opposing team tried to put up a last second shot, whether they were up or down or whatever. The game looked like it was over, and they still put up a shot. Because if you don't know, point differential matters in the in-season tournament when it comes to deciding the season, when deciding the seeding when we get to the elimination rounds. So the Raptors are up. I believe Pascal Siakam has the ball on the left wing, and his teammates and the coaching staff and the bench are yelling, "Shoot, shoot, shoot." He puts up a three. It doesn't go in. I think the Raptors get the rebound. A foul gets called, loose ball foul, whatever. And DeMar DeRozan is not happy with the moment. He starts chirping off. I couldn't tell. I watched the clip a couple of times and I tried to get different angles. I couldn't tell what he said or what was said, but he was not happy with the situation. Ends up getting a tech. I believe that was his second tech of the game, and he gets ejected. And then after the game, they're asking, he talks about the frustrations of the team as a whole, saying, yeah, we're frustrated. I'm frustrated. From a competitive standpoint, you're frustrated because we're losing, which I completely get. At this stage in DeMar DeRozan's career, he wants to win games. At the very least, he wants to win games. I don't know, and I think DeMar realizes he can't be the best player on the championship contending team, and I don't think that's what he means by frustrated with losing. But I don't think at this stage of his career, because DeMar honestly is still kind of good. Like I don't know how many teams he. I feel like I'm about to contradict myself because I was going to say at this stage of his career, DeMar DeRozan's still solid, but we talked about this last week when we looked at the Zach LaVine trades. I don't know who trades for DeMar DeRozan because you have to build a very specific team around him because he refuses to shoot the three ball. So I guess that's a conversation for another day on where DeMar DeRozan could go. But then he continues on after talking about the frustrations of just winning and wanting to be a part of winning culture and just mad at losing games as a Bull. They ask him about the frustration of shooting of Pascal Siakam shooting that last second basket. And he's like, yo, I don't care. I know it's the in-season tournament. I don't really care. He's like, talks about in-season points. And he says he has respect for his opponents. And if the shoe was on the other foot or if he was in their situation, he would have held the ball regardless of in-season points, in-season tournament, this, that, and the third. And one of the things that was a big conversations topic about the in-season tournament was who was going to be the first guy to get frustrated about someone shooting a last second shot. And I don't think DeMar was truly, he could be a little bit frustrated about the last second shot being shot or the shot being taken. But I think he was really just frustrated that he's a Chicago Bull right now and that the Bulls are as bad as they are. And as crazy as it sounds, I don't think there's a solution for the Bulls. He says if we just get a couple of wins, we can figure this out, turn the corner, and just be a better team. I truly think the Bulls are just bad. And then maybe next week we'll do a deeper dive into the Bulls. I'll be honest, I haven't watched a ton of Bulls games because honestly, there's not a lot to watch. But if there's interest, if the Bulls haven't traded Zach LaVine by next week, maybe we'll take a deep dive and look and see why they're as bad as they are. Because right now they're really bad. All right, shifting gears on a positive note and a little deeper dive. I've fallen in love with the Minnesota Timberwolves. And the reason I'm so excited to talk about them today is we talked about them a little bit last week, the how good Anthony Edwards has been playing. And last week we even talked about, do you trade Karl-Anthony Towns? And I think it was last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. And the reason I made that, I think it was a TikTok specifically that I made. And the reason was those first couple of games, and yes, it was a small sample size, the Timberwolves felt like they were winning without Karl-Anthony Towns doing much. Specifically coming off of a big game against the Boston Celtics. Karl-Anthony Towns had 7 points, and Anthony Edwards closed out that game in the fourth quarter. That was the game where Ant ends up in some foul trouble, but still get the game-winning stop against Jason Tatum, and he rips the ball from Tatum and shuts him down. I want to say that was either late in the fourth or in overtime. It was a couple weeks ago, so excuse me for misremembering. But since then, in the last 9 games, Karl-Anthony Towns has been absolutely fantastic. And I want to give him his flowers. One of the biggest things that I don't want to say complained about or noticed with Karl-Anthony Towns last season, and I want to say, yes, I realized Karl-Anthony Towns was battling injury last year. Yes, I realized Karl-Anthony Towns only played 29 games last year. And I also realized that I want to say the Minnesota Timberwolves starting 5, or at the very least, the big three in quotation marks, Rudy, Cat, and Ant only played 500 minutes last season, which isn't a lot in the grand scheme of things. For reference, they've already played over 300, like a little over 300 minutes together, which is all last season 500. About a month into the season, they've already played 300. So, in the grand scheme of things, not a lot of time together. I completely realize that. But all that being said, one of the things I noticed last year, especially in the playoffs, and we talked about this before, Karl Anthony Towns not looking as good as he normally does on drives. One of the things that makes Karl Anthony Towns so good is his ability to put the ball on the floor and get to the basket over slower defenders. But in the last 9 games, Karl Anthony Towns has looked fantastic. On drives, he's just driving the ball 11 times a game. He's 56% on drives, generating just 10 points a game on drives alone. Now, it honestly would probably be great if I had his actual numbers that I can get that for you in 1 second. Since that Boston game, Karl Anthony Towns is averaging 25 points, 8 rebounds, 57% from the field, and 53% from three on 5 threes a game. We talked about his drives, and I want to put that 11 drives a game, 56% shooting on drives, generating 10 points a game on just his drives alone into some context, looking at some other forwards who drive similarly amount and not putting up the same production that he's putting up. Pascal Siakam, 13 drives a game, 7 points. Zion, 17 drives a game, 10 points. Julius Randle, 15 drives a game, 7 points. And this is all during this same 9-game span since November, in the last 9 games, I'll say. But essentially since like mid-November. And the reason this is a big deal for me, and the reason this is a point of emphasis, is like I said earlier, this is a big part of Karl Anthony Towns' game historically has been driving past bigger, slower bigs, other centers. One of the hiccups and the things that people were talking about of how well will it work with him and Rudy on the court together is if the big is guarding Rudy, that means a faster power forward is on Karl Anthony Towns. Will his drive game work? Yes, the drive game is working still, and we'll get to why in a second. But B, the main reason I think the drive game is important to me is because if Karl Anthony Towns is driving to the basket at an efficient clip and keeping the defense honest, they're less likely to close out hard because they're scared of his drive now. And if you don't close out hard, and this last 9-game stretch, he's shooting over 50% from three. Karl Anthony Towns dubbed himself as the greatest big man shooter of all time. You can take that up with Dirk Nowitzki if you believe it or not. But at the very least, he's probably top 3 big man shooters all time. So if you leave him open, he's going to make you pay for it. And it's working out fantastic for the Minnesota Timberwolves right now. Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns continue to look better and better on the floor together. That was one of the point of emphasis that going into this season, I wanted to see how they were going to make it work. What were they going to run? Like, just to see what the offense was going to look like. And so far, it's looked really, really good. I've seen them do this a couple of times where they have both Rudy and Cat basically about free throw line extended towards the top of the key. And they'll have Rudy set a ball screen for either Anthony Edwards or Mike Conley, roll hard to the basket. And as Rudy is rolling, because Rudy's, I want to say, top 5 in screen assists right now, which I get is a weird stat, screen assists, who counts things like that. But the point here is Rudy is one of the best screen setters in the league, and B, honestly, an excellent roller, getting to the basket, finishing through traffic. So he's setting good screens, getting the ball handler open, which is now making his big man either decide to hedge, help, because he can't leave, especially if it's Anthony Edwards, you can't leave him wide open for a 3 or easy attack to the basket. Rudy's now rolling hard to the rim. So when Rudy rolls hard to the rim, Karl Anthony Towns is big, now has to decide, do I drop to help off of Rudy, or do I stay high on Karl Anthony Towns? And that's generating a lot of easy offense for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And there have been plenty of times where it's been that big tries to shade at least a little bit to the defending big, tries to shade to Rudy, leaving Karl Anthony Towns wide open for him to catch a shoot situation at the top of the key, or you stay on Cat and you let Rudy slip to the basket. And we talked about this last week when talking about Anthony Edwards. He's been doing a great job of finding Rudy Gobert in a lot of different pick and roll situations, and as he dives to the rim. The offense for the Minnesota Timberwolves is looking really, really good, and they're really starting to figure out how to play with both Rudy and Cat together. The defensive side of the ball is something I also want to talk about, and It's been fantastic. The defensive side of the ball has been absolutely fantastic for the Timberwolves. They were top 5 in defensive rating. They were number 1 like a couple of weeks ago. They might be down to just number 2 or number 3 right now. But we talked about Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels last week and talks about their on-ball defense, and then their ability to make it harder, force the offensive players into tougher shots, and honestly rip the ball from players like Anthony Edwards did against Jason Tatum. But we didn't talk much about their screen navigation and how they're navigating the pick and roll, whether that be forcing offensive players to their weak hand, simply forcing offensive players to reject the screen entirely, or if they do get picked, they're doing a great job of getting around the screen and funneling the offense to Rudy Gobert. Like that, the offensive player doesn't have a wide open or easy, get off the screen and shoot the three, or get off the screen and shoot the pull up midi, because Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels are doing an excellent job of avoiding screens, fighting through screens, and making that pull up shot either difficult or almost impossible, forcing them to go all the way to the rim. And now you have someone who's being continued to be one of the best shot blockers and rim protectors in the league, and Rudy Gobert protecting the basket. But the great part about their defense, and like I said, I'm smiling because I'm enjoying what they're doing, because it's Rudy in the paint. The rest of the defense doesn't feel that they have to collapse in those pick and roll scenarios. So now it's Rudy in the paint as this offensive player is being funneled with Jaden McDaniels behind them. And so now when they kick out, no one's really wide open, because the defense can rotate well, or close out on shooters easily, because they didn't have to collapse all the way, because they have faith and trust in Rudy to defend the rim. Years prior, that's Karl-Anthony Towns, and offensive Karl-Anthony Towns. I love his game, but we all know he's not an amazing rim protector. There would be 2-3 defenders collapsing in the paint. So now when you kick out, it's a wide open three. Everyone gets to stay home when it's Rudy in the paint, and now you kick out and it's a tougher shot. Just as a whole, as a scheme, you see the defense rotating better. You see the defense fighting through screens better, and you see them funneling to Rudy. And Rudy himself, he even looks different than how he did in his Utah Jazz years, because he doesn't have to sell out as hard in terms of defending the rim. He's still there, and he's still doing a good job at defending the rim. He looks very similar, like looks like he can be, and probably will be, in contention for a defensive player of the year this year so far this season if he keeps this up. But he's not selling out as hard, because he has faith and he believes in the defenders are on on the perimeter. If Jaden McDaniels or Anthony Edwards, or shoot, even Walker Kessler, Mike Conley, he's older, but he still has a great defensive mind. Rudy's not helping early. He doesn't have to help early, leaving his man wide open for an easy dump off pass, for an easy dunk or layup. He's not helping early. He's staying committed to his own man and only helping at the last minute when absolutely needed. If you're not watching the Timberwolves, you're doing yourself a disservice. Not only is Anthony Edwards much watched TV in himself, Karl-Anthony Towns continues to look better and better each game, and looking back to his All NBA, All Star self in these last couple of games. But if you really want to get into your basketball nerd bag, watch the Timberwolves play defense, because it is a beautiful sight to see. All right, so yesterday before recording, I asked on socials, said, "Hey, recording a pod this weekend. Any questions, comments, or topics you want me to cover?" One of the things was a potential trade for all the contending teams. Now, well, if you know me, you know I'm not necessarily one of the trade guru guys. I don't spend a lot of time in fanspo or in the trade maker and stuff like that to come up with trades. And I know it's one of the things that I think a lot of NBA fans get excited about, or trades, the idea of trades, player movement, because it gets just the imagination going in terms of the what if and what's possible, and team building, player movement. Like, that's just exciting stuff. Outside, obviously, of just the regular what's going on the court, I think that's to me, the most exciting thing. Y'all saw how excited I was just talking about the Timberwolves defense. Um, but all that being said, I'm not the trade guru, but you know who we are, or at least who claims to be. Bleacher Report. So I decided to take a look at a couple of Bleacher Report articles from the last couple of weeks. Some are from September, some are from October, one is from the beginning of November, and I just pulled a couple of trades from there, not looking at every team, I'm not even honestly looking at everybody who I think is a contender. I'm just looking at teams who A, I think potentially could be a contender, and B, they had to have a trade that I at least liked. So you won't see the Sixers on here because the articles were all written before the James Harden trade, so they were all about the James Harden. You won't see, although I think they could be. You won't see some sleepers like the Warriors because I think they're a little fringe. You won't see. I guess those are the main two teams. A lot of teams you'll see. We got one for the Nuggets. We got the Celtics in here. We got the Lakers. Don't kill me. We have the Heat. And we got the Bucks. So let's start out with the Celtics. The Celtics trade I like a lot. It's with the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the idea behind it is front court depth. It's Luke Cornett, Steve Maliuk. I can never pronounce his name right. Danilo Baton, and the 2024 first round pick, top 20 protected to the Thunder for Kendrick Williams. And the idea behind this is if the Boston Celtics feel that they need more front court depth, and it's ironic that we're bringing this up today because the Celtics tonight, I can't remember who they're playing, but as I was getting ready right before I recorded the pod, I'm on Twitter. I follow most NBA teams. The Celtics put out their starting lineup, and Danilo Banton is in the starting lineup for Kristaps Porzingis. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not sure. I was out most of this weekend, so I haven't caught up to see if Kristaps is injured or it's just the off of a back to back. I got to do some more research myself, but I do think it's ironic that we're talking about the Celtics needing more front court depth, and in the game that we're recording this tonight, Kristaps isn't starting for whatever reason. Kendrick Williams has been pretty solid so far this season. I wouldn't call him like a crazy needle mover or a game changer. This is simply for if the Celtics feel like they need more front court depth. He's a solid shooter, about 37% this year. 33% last year. On only 2 attempts per game, so not crazy volume, but he's solid. He's a solid player. He looks good for the Thunder when he's on the court. I like his game for the most part. If he's out there just to stretch the floor, grab some rebounds, if the Celtics feel like they need more front court depth. Most of these trades, to be honest with you, I don't think there are trades that these teams have to make anytime soon. A lot of these trades will probably be there leading up until February at the trade deadline. But if they feel like they need some depth, I think it's an opportunity for them. And why would the Thunder be interested in this, you ask? You got the 2024 first round pick, top 20 protected, so not the most exciting. But all of the Celtics players that will be moving to OKC in this potential trade are either on expiring deals or team options. So it just leaves a lot more flexibility in terms of cap space for the Thunder in the future. Looking now at the Denver Nuggets, which I'll explain more of this. This one is more so if they feel like they needed a solid replacement for Bruce Brown. I will say I think Christian Brown and Peyton Watson have been really, really good this year, especially Peyton Watson on the defensive side of the ball. The numbers don't really show a lot, but when you watch his game, whenever he's on the court, he's making the right plays on the defensive end of the ball. But this trade is Peyton Watson and Zeke Naji to the Houston Rockets for Jason Tate and a 2024 second round pick via OKC. Now, Jason Tate, I think would like on the Nuggets. Like we talked about him, I want to say it was in last week's episode when we were talking about the Rockets and how well they've been playing. His numbers don't tell you this, and I've only watched a handful of Rockets games, but when I'm turning on to the Rockets games, I'm catching the games where he's shooting the ball at a high clip. So Jason Tate, he's a versatile defender. His catch and shoot, especially from the corner, is actually really solid. You put him with Jokic, that's a match made in heaven in my mind. Once again, Christian Brown and Peyton Watson have been actually pretty solid for the Nuggets. They don't need to make this move, but it's an option out there for them. Los Angeles Lakers, this is a trade if they don't believe in D'Angelo Russell and want to move off of him come mid-December. And the good thing about this trade is they would have plenty of time to evaluate if this D'Angelo Russell fits on their team. I don't want to say D'Angelo Russell experiment, but if he fits on their team or not, because he can't be traded till December 15th anyway. This trade is D'Angelo Russell and Jalen Hood-Schifino to the Portland Trailblazers for Malcolm Brogdon. Now, D'Lo has a player option for next year for $18 million, and J Hood has a team option. Brogdon makes $22 million next year. So if you're the Blazers, you're making this trade to go from potentially Brogdon's $22 million to only D'Lo's 18 if he opts into his player option, or he might decide to go somewhere else. Just a little bit of cap space drop. Money move for the Blazers, essentially. But on paper, you might be like, why do this move if you're the Lakers? D'Lo, 16 points this season, 6 assists, 39% from 3. Malcolm Brogdon, 17 points, 5 assists, 36% from three. Relatively the same player on paper if you're just looking at the counting stats. Uh, I think this trade is more so a fit trade. D'Lo is looked at historically as a scoring guard, a guy who needs the ball in his hands, a guy who likes to create his own offense. Malcolm Brogdon, and speaking of, we all know D'Lo said in the beginning of the season he wants to be Derek White. Derek White is his inspiration for this season. Malcolm Brogdon, on the other hand, is looked at as, I like to call him a system guard. Like, he reminds me of a system point guard, historically takes care of the ball. And the big piece for the Lakers, he's a much better defender than D'Angelo Russell is. Mentally and just the physical tools, he's simply a better defender than D'Angelo Russell is. The trade, once again, can't happen until mid-December. So, honestly, I feel like the Lakers would have plenty of time to really evaluate if this D'Angelo Russell is or is not the fit for this team. And I'm really excited to see specifically Malcolm Brogdon, because I think he can impact a lot of teams just because of the type of guard he is. He's not going to add a whole lot to your offense in terms of self-creation or trying to take over a game, not a closer or anything like that. But he's a guard who's going to take care of the ball, he's going to knock down shots, and he's going to play amazing defense. He can be a benefit to a lot of teams. But the Lakers specifically, I'm back and forth on whether or not they should do this trade, because one of the things that I've personally been talking about for the past couple of weeks is how good can the Lakers be when LeBron's not on the floor. And I think a big piece of the Lakers being good when LeBron isn't on the floor is having guys who can create their own shots and be aggressive. In theory, D'Lo should fit that, being able to turn it on when LeBron's not on the floor, create for others, create for themselves. We all know Anthony Davis should be that as well. That's, I guess, a conversation from another day. I've had this theory for a while now that Anthony Davis and even Bam, to an extent, we'll talk about him in a second, they expend so much energy on the defensive side of the ball that, not saying they don't have any more in the tank on offense, but it could simply be that they're just better defenders than they are offensive players. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. I just think as fans and of these teams, we want more from them on the offensive side of the ball, but that just might not be in their game. To varying degrees, I think Anthony Davis is a better offensive player than Bam Adebayo. I'm not saying they're the same on the offensive side of the ball. I'm just saying they both do so much defensively for their teams that I think the defensive side of the ball and the defensive impact that they bring gets overlooked because we want them to do so much more offensively. And Anthony Davis specifically gets coined as a guy who's not really doing anything for the Lakers. And he's putting that defense on his back, historically at least. But once again, that trade can't happen until December, so we'll see if the Lakers decide to do it. And this is more of a tame trade, I guess I'll say, if they decide to not swing for either a Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan. I think those are the bigger names that are out there on the trade market, considering the Bulls, and we just talked about them, are possibly blowing it up or should be blowing it up. If they don't decide to blow it up, I think this is a solid tamer trade without shaking it up too much for them. Miami Heat. I thought this one was interesting that the Bleacher Report had. This is Tyler Hero, Caleb Martin, Nikola Jovic, a 2027 first round pick, 2029 first round pick to Cleveland for Donovan Mitchell and Sam Merrill. Honestly, I don't know if I want the Heat to do this. They're 7-3 in their last 10. Historically, the last couple of years, we know the Heat just figure it out. As silly and as non-basketball analysis verbiage as that is, they figure it out. They find ways to play well in the playoffs. They come together in the playoffs. Jimmy Butler turns into a whole different player in the playoffs. Jimmy has a very similar Kawhi-ness to him. Jimmy and Kawhi are very similar in the aspect of they might take their foot off the gas during the regular season, but playoffs, they look like completely different players. And also, Bam's been great this season. 22 a game so far this season. He's only had 2 games where he was under 20. I know Miami Heat fans, something that they wanted was Bam to do more on the offensive side of the ball. It's very similar to what we just talked about Anthony Davis, but he does so much for them defensively that sometimes I'm just like, maybe he just don't have it in the tank. But this year he's being more aggressive. He's honestly loving that mid-range free throw line extended jumper that he got in his bag. He's been going to that more and more. And we had this conversation last week about Miami when we were talking about Zach LaVine. And part of the conversation was how much better is Zach LaVine than Tyler Hero, right? Donovan is definitely better than Tyler Hero. And I think there's a noticeable difference between the two of them. Donovan scores at a much higher clip. I want to say Donovan's at about 28 a game, and Zach was at 22, and Hero was at 21. Uh, DeMar, to me, is a way better closer than Hero or Zach. DeMar can be, excuse me, Donovan Mitchell can be a great closer for the Miami Heat. I think this would change up a lot of the hierarchy of this team, figuring out the offense. And I think Donovan would come in there and immediately be the guy who takes the most shots. Not necessarily saying, and I don't want to really get into the weeds of this, not necessarily saying he's a better player than Jimmy Butler, but I think during the regular season, he would be taking the most shots on that team. So that would be a really big adjustment for them. I'm not saying Eric Spoelstra and Miami he couldn't figure it out. I just don't know if they need to. Donovan's still under contract for, I want to say, at least 2 more years. So it's not like you would trade for him and he can go away right away. I like the idea of it on 2K. I don't know if I like the idea of it in real life because it takes away some depth with Caleb Martin and Jovic leaving. Jovic has been solid for them at times, and Caleb Martin, we know, was good for them in the playoffs last year. I like how good Tyler Hero's been playing most of this season. I know he's been injured. I want to say the last like 2-3 games he's missed, or at least some of that 7-3 streak over the last 10 he was out. We'll see what they decide to do. I don't think the Heat need to make a move. I actually just asked my boy about this the other day. We were talking about Zach LaVine. He's a big Miami Heat fan. When the LaVine rumors were coming out, I said, "Do you want LaVine, or do you think they should trade for LaVine?" And he was kind of saying what I was saying. Was like, LaVine's not that much better than Hero. I don't think he should do it. Did not get a chance to ask him about Donovan Mitchell. And I know some Heat fans, when Donovan Mitchell was rumored to be being moved last summer before he got traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Heat were one of the teams that were interested. There was some disappointment that they did not get him. So we'll see if they decide to make a move this year. Last trade I have here listed is the Milwaukee Bucks, which I thought was interesting. The thought behind this is more defense to play alongside Damian Lillard. Pat Connaughton, Marjon Beauchamp, Andre Jackson Jr. to the Orlando Magic for Gary Harris. Gary Harris is a solid defender. He can knock down an open three. He's not going to be asked to do much on the offensive side of the ball, which I think is best for Gary Harris. Might make sense for the Orlando Magic, considering they have a decent amount of guards. If they want to get off of Gary Harris, Jalen Suggs has looked really, really good this year. So move on from Gary Harris and take on Pat Connaughton to add some veteran leadership into that roster. I like this for the Bucks. And the Bucks have been playing better. I didn't look at the whole thing, but I just saw a tweet saying that, what was it? See if I can find it real quick. What is that dude's name? I'm literally drawing a blank right here. Damian Lillard has looked better in the last 4 or 5 games. He's looking back closer to his normal self. And it's not nitpicking. I feel like it's nitpicking whenever we talk about the Bucks because we're like, oh, the Bucks need to do this, the Bucks need to do that. But the Bucks are still a really good team and they're figuring it out. So I don't think they need to do this. This is just a tweak to try to get that defense closer to what they're used to when Drew Holiday on the floor. You're not ever going to get back to that. Drew Holiday's honestly probably the best or one of the best guard defenders in the league. But you could make some edge changes around the edges, and Gary Harris wouldn't be a bad addition. All right, shifting gears, 2 last things I want to talk about before we get out of here. 2 quick shout outs. I didn't have as much time to do some deep dives on one player and one team, but they've been balling very, very well. And maybe I'll talk about them more maybe next week or later this week. Maybe we'll shoot a bonus episode. I'm not sure yet. But RJ Barrett, I don't want to say he finally looks like the version of RJ Barrett that the Knicks thought they were going to get initially all those years ago. But the version of RJ Barrett that we're seeing right now is probably the best version of RJ we've ever seen. 20 points a game, 46% from 3, which I don't think is sustainable at all. But if we can get around the 40s or high 30s by the end of the season, for the duration of the season, that'd be absolutely fantastic. But the main reason I want to shout out RJ is his defense. The defense that he's been playing has been great for the Knicks. And right now, the Knicks are now I don't want to say thriving. They're a little up and down sometimes. Julius Randle still looks up and down at times. But they're a top 10 defense, 13th in offense. Like I said, middle of the pack in offense. They're up and down sometimes on the offensive side of the ball. But defensively, this team looks like a Tom Thibodeau team, and a big piece of that has been RJ Barrett's defense. I wanted to show him some love and give him a shout out. The second team I wanted to shout out and show some love to is the team that currently has the number one defense in the NBA, and that is the Orlando Magic. They're currently third in the Eastern Conference with a record of 11-5. They're on a 6-game win streak, and like I said, number one defense in the NBA. I'll be honest, haven't watched a ton of Magic games, but I recognize that they've been rolling and wanted to give them some love. Did they make that field goal? Oh my gosh. Sorry. Like I said earlier, the Eagles are playing the Bills as I'm recording this. We just sent this game into overtime. Uh, but that's all I got for you guys today. Shout out to the RJ. Shout out to the Magic. I'll see you guys next week. Once again, as always, if you made it this far, you're a real one. Leave a like if you're watching on YouTube. Leave 5 stars if you're listening on an audio platform. And let me know if you enjoyed it. I'll catch you next one. I'm out. Peace.